cool autumn breeze swirled through the open windows of Willow Creek Wedding Chapel, carrying the delicate scent of late-blooming roses and new beginnings. Clara Evans stood before a full-length mirror in the bride's suite, her trembling hands adjusting the intricate lace veil cascading down her back. Her reflection showed more than just a young woman on her wedding day. It told a story that began over 2 decades ago. A promise made in innocence, with crayons and cookies, was about to be fulfilled. 5 minutes, honey, Clara's mother called from behind the door, her voice thick with emotion. Clara closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Suddenly she was 4 years old again, standing in Miss Peterson's preschool classroom. She wore her favorite yellow polka dot dress, and the air was filled with the unmistakable scent of crayons and Play-Doh. Across the room, Leo Carter stood on the reading carpet with chocolate smudged across his cheek. While other boys teased that girls had cooties, Leo was always different. He had just shared his chocolate chip cookie with her, a treasure in preschool currency. "I'm gonna marry Clara when I grow up," Leo declared to the class, his tiny chest puffed with pride. His dark curls framed his earnest brown eyes as he pointed at her. "Because she's the nicest person ever, and she shares her crayons." Leo was an elementary school-aged boy living in a 1-bedroom house in Poland. All he needed was money. The class burst into laughter, but Miss Peterson smiled and captured the moment with her Polaroid camera. In the photograph, Leo grinned gap-toothed and proud, while Clara stood beside him, clutching a purple crayon. "Cross my heart and hope to eat worms," Leo added solemnly. To a 4-year-old, it was the most binding promise he could make. The knock at the door brought Clara back to the present. Her sister Lily peeked inside, radiant in a lavender bridesmaid's dress. "They're ready for you, Clara." "Oh, and you'll never guess who's here." "Who?" Clara asked, her heartbeat quickening. "Miss Peterson," Lily said, holding up a small, worn box. "She brought something. I think it's that old Polaroid." Clara's chest tightened with emotion as she reached for the pearl necklace around her neck. Leo had given it to her on their engagement day, a symbol of their long and winding journey together. She glanced once more at her reflection. Though the little girl in the yellow dress had grown up, her eyes still held the same spark from that day in preschool. Some promises, it seemed, were meant to last a lifetime. Clara and Leo had grown up as neighbors on Maplewood Lane, their houses separated by a shared wooden fence with a small gate their fathers had built. Every morning, Leo would wait by his porch, backpack slung over one shoulder, watching for Clara's pink curtains to flutter open. Then, they'd walk to the bus stop together, trading stickers or comparing cereal box treasures. Their childhood was a series of adventures. In 1st grade, they turned Leo's backyard treehouse into a secret clubhouse where they conducted scientific experiments that often involved mud and glitter. By 2nd grade, Leo had become Clara's biggest fan, cheering her on at her first dance recital with a handmade "Go Clara" sign. When Clara's younger sister Lily was born prematurely in 3rd grade, Leo's family stepped in to help. Leo appointed himself as Lily's official entertainment committee, crafting shadow puppet shows to make her smile. By 4th grade, their bond was tested for the first time. Leo joined the local soccer team, while Clara threw herself into theater and art. Despite their busy schedules, they found ways to support each other. Leo would practice his footwork in Clara's driveway while she rehearsed her lines for school plays. They called it soccer theater, an invention uniquely theirs. The summer before 5th grade brought a turning point. During a neighborhood block party, a boy teased Clara about her new braces, making her cry behind the Johnsons' garage. Leo found her there and said, "Braces mean you're brave. You're making your smile even more amazing. That's like being a superhero." Clara laughed through her tears, calling him weird, but she never forgot his words. Their friendship deepened with time, evolving into something both simple and extraordinary. They communicated with glances and gestures that no one else understood. By 6th grade, they were inseparable, much to their teachers' exasperation. Even when assigned separate projects, they'd find ways to collaborate. In 7th grade, they joined forces for the science fair, creating a volcano and a crystal display that perfectly complemented each other. But life had other plans. The summer before freshman year, Clara's father announced a job promotion that required the family to move to Chicago. The news hit like a thunderbolt. Clara and Leo spent their last evening together in their treehouse, clutching the Polaroid from preschool. "It's only 6 hours away," Clara said, trying to sound optimistic. "We'll text and call," Leo replied, "and visit every summer. A promise is a promise, Clara." They exchanged gifts that night. Clara gave Leo a friendship bracelet she had made, blue and green threads woven together. Leo handed her a notebook filled with doodles and notes from their years together. "So you don't forget me," he said quietly. Their goodbye was bittersweet, filled with tears and unspoken fears. As Clara's family drove away, Leo stood in his driveway, clutching the Polaroid, watching until their car disappeared from sight. High school was a whirlwind of change. Clara threw herself into theater at her new school, earning lead roles in plays and discovering a passion for writing scripts. Leo excelled in soccer, becoming the team captain by sophomore year. They texted and video called often, but the distance between Chicago and their hometown seemed to grow with each passing year. Their connection faced its first real test when Leo started dating Emily Tran, a brilliant and confident classmate who shared his love for soccer. Clara learned about it through social media, her chest tightening when she saw photos of them at homecoming. To distract herself, she accepted a date with Alex Carter, the lead actor in her school's production of Romeo and Juliet. Though they laughed and shared fun moments, neither relationship lasted. Both Clara and Leo found their hearts drifting back to the friendship they had left behind. Despite the challenges, they held on to their annual tradition. On the anniversary of their preschool promise, one would text the other, "Still planning to keep that promise?" The reply was always the same: "Cross my heart and hope to eat worms." As high school turned into college, their paths diverged further. Clara was accepted into Northwestern University's prestigious theater program, while Leo earned a soccer scholarship to a university in California. They were proud of each other's achievements, but couldn't ignore the growing distance, both physical and emotional. Yet fate had its own plans. On a crisp September morning, during freshman orientation at Northwestern, Clara rushed across campus, clutching a stack of scripts and a latte. She collided with someone outside the coffee shop, her coffee spilling everywhere. "I'm so sorry," she stammered, looking up, and froze. "Clara?" Leo's familiar voice was incredulous. He stood before her, dressed in soccer gear, his dark curls now slightly shorter, but still unruly. For a moment they stared at each other, oblivious to the world around them. Then they both laughed and embraced, the years and distance melting away. "What are you doing here?" Clara asked, her heart racing. "Transferred," Leo explained with a grin. "Decided to be closer to family, and to you." Clara felt her cheeks flush as she smiled. Looks like some promises really are meant to be kept. The crowd hushed as Clara took her first step down the aisle, the soft piano notes of Claire de Lune filling the chapel. She locked eyes with Leo, standing tall at the altar. His dark curls were neatly combed, his suit perfectly tailored, but it was his warm, familiar smile that calmed her racing heart. She could almost hear his voice from years ago, promising her the world, with a purple crayon in his hand. As Clara walked toward him, memories played like a slideshow in her mind. There was Leo helping her across the monkey bars in 2nd grade, his hand steady beneath hers. Leo cheering her on as she landed her first cartwheel. Leo laughing uncontrollably as they tried, and failed, to bake a birthday cake for her mother in 8th grade. Every milestone, every moment, had led to this. When Clara finally reached him, he extended his hand. She took it, her fingers fitting perfectly in his, just as they always had. The officiant began the ceremony, but Clara barely heard the words. Her mind lingered on the past, the struggles and triumphs that brought them here. Their freshman year at Northwestern had been a whirlwind. Reconnecting after years apart wasn't without its challenges. Clara's theater schedule was demanding, and Leo's soccer commitments left little time for anything else. Yet they found ways to make it work. Late-night study sessions turned into deep conversations, and casual coffee runs became cherished rituals. For the first time in years, Clara felt like she'd come home. One night, during a rare lull in their schedules, Leo invited Clara to a campus park. They spread a blanket under a canopy of stars, their laughter mingling with the soft rustle of leaves. Leo pulled out a familiar object, a friendship bracelet, worn and frayed from years of use. "I kept it," he said, his voice quiet. "It's been through a lot, but so have we." Clara's heart swelled as she reached into her bag, pulling out the notebook he had given her the night she moved away. "And I kept this," she replied, flipping through pages of doodles and memories. "You've always been a part of my story, Leo." Their bond deepened as the months passed, but it wasn't always easy. They argued over misunderstandings and struggled to balance their dreams with their relationship. Leo once missed one of Clara's performances because of an away game, and Clara forgot to wish him luck before a crucial match. Yet, each time, they found their way back to each other, their connection stronger than before. By the time they graduated, Clara had secured a position as a playwright at a local theater, while Leo was offered a coaching role at a nearby high school. The future seemed bright, but it was during a quiet evening at their favorite cafe that Leo surprised her. "I've been thinking," he began, fidgeting with his coffee mug, "about us, about what's next." Clara tilted her head, curiosity sparking in her eyes. "What's on your mind?" Leo reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "I don't want to imagine a future without you," he said, opening the box. Tears filled Clara's eyes as she nodded, unable to speak. She leaned across the table and kissed him, her heart full of hope and certainty. The years that followed were a blur of joy and growth. Clara's plays began gaining recognition, and Leo's soccer team won their first state championship. They moved into a cozy apartment together, filling it with laughter, love, and the occasional squabble over who forgot to do the dishes. Life wasn't perfect, but it was there. One evening, after a particularly successful opening night for Clara's latest play, Leo took her to the same park where they had stargazed years ago. The blanket was the same, though now worn with age, and the stars above seemed to shine brighter than ever. "I think it's time," Leo said, his voice steady despite the nervous energy in his eyes. "Time for what?" Clara asked, though her heart already knew the answer. Leo dropped to one knee, pulling out a small velvet box. "Time to keep that promise I made when I was 4, he said, opening the box to reveal a diamond ring that sparkled like the stars above. "Clara Evans, will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Clara's cheeks as she nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, Leo, 1,000 times, yeah." Told themselves that at first they might feel a shift in depression through meaningful exercise, this including massages, worldwide, as heartbreaking to so valiant ones. Now, as they stood at the altar, the officiant's voice brought Clara back to the present. "Do ye, Leo Carter, take Clara Evans to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold?" "And do," I said, his voice strong and clear. "And do you, Clara Evans, take Leo Carter to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and health, for as long as you both shall live?" "I do," Clara replied, her voice trembling. As they exchanged rings, Clara felt the weight of their journey settle around her like a warm embrace. This wasn't just a wedding, it was a celebration of every step they had taken to reach this moment. "You may now kiss the bride," the officiant announced. Leo leaned in, his hands gently cradling Clara's face as their lips met. The chapel erupted in applause, but for Clara and Leo, the world had faded away. In that kiss, they promised each other a lifetime of love, laughter, and adventure. The reception that followed was a blur of laughter, music, and heartfelt toasts. As the night wore on, Clara and Leo found a quiet moment beneath the stars. They sat on a bench, her head resting on his shoulder as they gazed at the moonlit sky. "You know," Clara began, her voice soft, "I used to think that promises were just words, but you've shown me that there's so much more." Leo kissed the top of her head, his arm wrapped tightly around her. And you've shown me that some promises are worth everything. Their journey was far from over, but as they sat together beneath the stars, they knew one thing for certain. Some promises really are meant to last a lifetime. The morning sun streamed through the curtains of the small, cozy apartment that Clara and Leo now called home. The scent of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air as Clara shuffled into the kitchen, her silk robe loosely tied around her waist. The events of the previous day still felt like a dream, but the ring on her finger and the man standing at the counter pouring 2 mugs of coffee assured her that it was all real. "Good morning, Mrs. Carter," Leo said with a teasing grin, handing her a steaming mug. His dark curls were still slightly dazzled from sleep, and the sight made Clara's heart swell. "Good morning, Mr. Carter," she replied, taking the mug and leaning up to kiss him softly. "Still getting used to the name." "You've got the rest of our lives to get used to it," he said, pulling her into a warm embrace. They stood like that for a moment, letting the quiet hum of their new life settle around them. It was a far cry from the chaos of their wedding day with its whirlwind of emotions, speeches, and endless congratulations. For the first time in weeks, everything felt calm, like the world had pressed pause just for that. "So," Clara began, pulling back slightly to look up at him, "what's the plan for today?" "Well, I thought we'd take it easy, maybe unpack some of the wedding gifts, figure out where to put that ridiculously large blender your aunt gave us, and then maybe—" He trailed off, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "Maybe what?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Maybe we'll revisit the tree house, for old time's sake." Clara's eyes widened in surprise. "You want to go back to the tree house after all these years?" "Why not? It's where it all started, isn't it?" She smiled, the thought of returning to their childhood sanctuary filling her with a mix of excitement and nostalgia. "Okay," she said. "Let's do it." Later that afternoon, they arrived at Maplewood Lane, where the familiar sight of their childhood homes greeted them. The wooden fence separating their backyards was still there, though the paint had faded and the gate creaked a little more than it used to. Clara's parents had moved out years ago, but the new owners had kept much of the original charm intact. "It feels smaller," Clara remarked as they walked through the yard. "Or maybe we've just gotten bigger." Leo laughed. "Definitely bigger. But look, the tree house is still standing." The old tree house, nestled among the sturdy branches of the oak tree, looked much the same as it had all those years ago. The wooden planks were weathered and the paint was peeling, but it was still their tree house. The ladder they had once climbed, or "Think it can hold your meat?" Clara asked, eyeing the structure nervously. "Only one way to find out," Leo said, starting his ascent. The ladder creaked, but it held firm as he reached the top. He turned and extended a hand to Clara. She hesitated for a moment before taking his hand and climbing up. When she finally reached the top, she let out a small laugh. "It's exactly the same," she said, looking around at the small wooden space. "Is that—" she began. Leo nodded, reaching for the box. "Our treasure chest. I can't believe it's still here." He opened the... Clara picked up the photo, her fingers tracing the edges. "I can't believe we kept all of this." "Some things are worth keeping," Leo said, his voice soft. They spent the next hour sifting through the contents of the box, laughing at the memories and sharing stories they hadn't thought about in years. It was as if time had folded in on itself. "Do you remember the time we tried to make a zip line from here to my bedroom window?" Clara asked, wiping tears of laughter from her eyes. "How could I forget?" Leo replied. "Your dad grounded us for a week when he found out. Said we were lucky we didn't break our necks." "We were so fearless back then," Clara said, a wistful smile on her face. "We still are," Leo said, taking her hand. "Maybe in different ways, but we are." Clara leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling a deep sense of contentment. "I'm glad we came back here," she said. "It's nice to remember where we started." "Me too," Leo said. "The best part of our story is still ahead of us." The weeks that followed were a blur of newlywed bliss and settling into their routine. Clara continued her work at the theater, her scripts gaining recognition for their heartfelt storytelling. Leo, meanwhile, poured his energy into coaching, his team quickly becoming one of the top contenders in the state. He hoped to be specializing past 20. One evening, as Clara worked on a new play in their living room, Leo walked in carrying a stack of paper. "What's that?" Clara asked, glancing up from her laptop. "Just some ideas I've been jotting down," he said, sitting beside her. "I was thinking, what if we collaborated on something?" Clara's eyebrows shot up. "Collaborated? Like on a play?" "Why not?" Leo said. "You've got the storytelling skills, and I've got ideas, and I'm pretty good at cheering you on." She laughed, but the idea intrigued her. "Okay," she said, "let's hear these ideas." They spent the rest of the evening brainstorming, their laughter filling the room as they bounced ideas off each other. By the time they finally called it a night, Clara realized just how much she loved working with Leo in this new way. Over the next few months, their collaboration grew into something tangible. They wrote a play together, drawing inspiration from their own story. Titled "Cross My Heart," it was a heartfelt tale about childhood promises and the enduring power of love. When it premiered at Clara's theater, it received a standing ovation, with many audience members moved to tears. After the final curtain call, Leo pulled Clara into his arms backstage. "We make a pretty good team," he said, his voice filled with pride. "The best," Clara agreed, her heart full. As the years passed, Clara and Leo's life together became a beautiful tapestry of love, laughter, and shared dreams. They celebrated milestones big and small, from the opening of Clara's first full-length play to Leo's team winning their first championship. Through it all, they never forgot the promises they'd made to each other. On their anniversaries, they would exchange small gifts. One evening, as they sat together on their apartment balcony, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, Leo turned to Clara with a thoughtful expression. "You know," he said, "if someone had told 4-year-old me that I'd actually marry the girl who shared her crayons with me, I'm not sure I would have believed them." Clara laughed, resting her head on his shoulder. "Well, if someone had told 4-year-old me that the boy with chocolate on his face would grow up to be my husband, I probably wouldn't have believed them either." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Clara spoke again. "Do you ever wonder what our story will look like in 20, 30 years?" Leo smiled, his hand finding hers. "All I know is that it'll be a good one, because it's ours." And with that, they leaned into each other, the promise of their shared future shining as brightly as the stars above. The seasons changed, and with each passing year, Clara and Leo found themselves embracing the ebbs and flows of married life. They learned to cherish the small, quiet moments as much as the grand milestones. Their love was steady, a glowing ember that never faded, even as the world around them changed. One crisp autumn morning, Clara sat at her desk, the golden sunlight streaming through the window of their new home. It was a charming house on the outskirts of the city, with ivy creeping along its brick walls and a sprawling backyard perfect for daydreaming. She was working on the first draft of her next play, a story about two childhood friends who rediscover their connection after years apart. She smiled as she wrote, knowing exactly where the inspiration had come from. Leo stepped into the room, holding 2 mugs of hot cocoa. His coaching job had grown more demanding over the years, but he always found time for Clara. "How's the masterpiece coming along?" he asked, placing a mug on the desk beside her. Clara leaned back in her chair, stretching. "Slowly, but it's getting there. It's hard to put into words how some relationships feel like they're written in the stars." Leo grinned and kissed her forehead. "If anyone can capture that feeling, it's you." Their peaceful morning was interrupted by the sound of tiny, rapid footsteps echoing through the hall. "Mommy, Daddy," a small voice called out. A little girl burst into the room, her dark curls bouncing as she ran straight into Leo's arms. This was Ellie, their 3-year-old daughter, the newest chapter in their story. She was the spitting image of Clara, with her father's lively energy and a mischievous glint in her eyes that often spelled trouble. "What's all the excitement, Peanut?" Leo asked, lifting her onto his hip. Ellie held up a crayon drawing of what appeared to be their family standing beneath a tree. "Look, it's us. And this is the treehouse you told me about." Clara and Leo exchanged a glance, their hearts swelling with pride and nostalgia. They had often shared stories of their childhood adventures with Ellie, painting vivid pictures of the treehouse, the monkey bars, and the backyard escapades that had defined their early years. "It's perfect," Clara said, pulling Ellie into her lap. "You've got quite the talent, little artist. Can we go there someday?" Ellie asked, her big brown eyes filled with wonder. Leo smiled. "You bet. In fact, how about we visit this weekend? We'll show you where Mommy and Daddy made all our promises." Ellie shrugged. That weekend, they packed a picnic and made the short drive back to Maplewood Lane. The neighborhood hadn't changed much, though the treehouse now stood abandoned, its wooden planks weathered by time. Still, it held a magical charm. Especially in Ellie's eyes, Clara and Leo helped Ellie climb up the ladder, one careful step at a time. Once inside, Ellie gasped in awe. "It's like a castle," she declared, her imagination transforming the humble treehouse into something grand. As they sat together, sharing sandwiches and telling stories, Clara felt a deep sense of gratitude. This wasn't just a trip down memory lane. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where their daughter would weave her own memories into the tapestry of their lives. The years flew by in a blur of soccer games, school plays, and late-night storytelling sessions under a blanket of stars. Ellie grew into a bright, spirited girl who shared her parents' love for creativity and adventure. She often filled their home with laughter and curiosity, peppering them with questions about their past. "Mom," Ellie asked one evening as they baked cookies in the kitchen, "did you always know you'd marry Dad?" Clara chuckled, brushing flour from her hands. "Not always, but I think a part of me knew, even when we were little, that your dad was someone special." "Like a prince?" Ellie asked, her eyes wide. Clara smiled. "Not a prince exactly, more like my best friend, someone who made me feel safe and happy, no matter what." Leo walked in at that moment, scooping Ellie into his arms. "And I always knew your mom was the coolest person I'd ever meet," he said, kissing Clara on the cheek. Ellie giggled. "You guys are so mushy." As Ellie grew older, Clara and Leo encouraged her to pursue her passions. She inherited her mother's love for the arts, often sketching or writing stories in her notebook. But she also had her father's athleticism, excelling in soccer, and proudly wearing the jersey number Leo had once donned. Ellie pointed to the jersey number on the back of Leo's jersey. Their family bond grew stronger with each passing year, grounded in love, trust, and shared memories. Yet, life wasn't without its challenges. Clara's theater faced financial difficulties, threatening to close its doors. Leo's coaching job became increasingly demanding, leaving him exhausted at the end of long days. And as Ellie entered her teenage years, she began to test boundaries, challenging her parents in ways they hadn't anticipated. One evening, after a particularly heated argument with Ellie over curfew, Clara sat on the porch, her head in her hands. Leo joined her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "She'll come around," he said softly. "She's got your fire, you know." Clara sighed. "I just want her to understand that we're on her side." "She will," Leo assured her. "We did plenty of rebelling in our day, remember? And look how we turned out." Clara laughed despite herself. Fair point. Their laughter faded into a comfortable silence as they watched the stars. No matter what challenges they faced, they knew they would navigate them together, just as they always had. One crisp autumn evening, decades after their wedding day, Clara and Leo found themselves back at the chapel where they had exchanged vows. This time, they were guests, sitting in the front row as Ellie prepared to walk down the aisle. Clara's heart swelled with emotion as she watched her daughter adjust her lace veil, much like she had done all those years ago. Ellie's fiancé Daniel stood nervously at the altar, his love for her evident in every glance. "Ready to pass the torch?" Leo whispered, his hand finding Clara's. She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "I just can't believe how fast the time has gone." As the ceremony began, Clara and Leo exchanged a glance, their minds filled with memories of their own journey. They had built a life together, one filled with love, laughter, and promises that had stood the test of time. When Ellie and Daniel exchanged vows, Clara couldn't help but smile, knowing that her daughter was beginning her own beautiful story. In the twilight of their years, Clara and Leo often found themselves reminiscing about the life they had built. They still visited the treehouse occasionally, though their steps were slower and the ladder felt steeper. They had added new stories to their treasure chest, filling it with photographs, letters, and mementos from their travels and adventures. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, Leo turned to Clara with a thoughtful expression. "Do you think we've kept all our promises?" Clara leaned her head against his shoulder, her heart full. Every single one. They sat in comfortable silence, their hands intertwined, as the sky turned shades of orange and pink. Shane looked across at her and said, "Your face is starting to turn crimson." Their journey wasn't over, but they knew they had lived a life rich with love and meaning, a testament to the promises they had made and kept. Some promises, after all, really are meant to last a lifetime. Before you leave, check out the next video on screen for another captivating story. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss our latest upload.